24/7 availability, we make it easy to get your case started, right from the comfort of your couch. All firms are not the same. The choice is easy. Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm, for the people.
Count on Local 3 News for the local stories that affect your life.
Okay, so next time you call for an Uber or a Lyft in Tennessee, you probably should check your own insurance policy first, because if you do not have uninsured motorist coverage, you could be left with nowhere to turn if there is an accident. So says the Sages, C. Mark Warren and John Mark Griffin. They're here to explain. Good to see you.
Ain't it good to be alive and be in Tennessee, Julie?
It's always a good day. Well, it's always a good day to be alive and be in Tennessee.
Absolutely.
However, in Tennessee,
Uber has
you better be
changed their
careful.
policies. You know, Uber and Lyft, both ride-sharing companies, used to cover uninsured motorists. Right. They have dropped uninsured motorists, and now it's up to the passenger to have uninsured motorists. So please, you know, check and make sure before you set foot in an Uber or a Lyft, make sure you have uninsured motorists.
There's some states require it. You know, Georgia, for example, requires that these ride shares, you know, provide uninsured motorist coverage, you know, for the passengers. But Tennessee doesn't.
Do you know why? And did this just change this year?
Well, you know, Uber is a for-profit company, right? So is Lyft. And so when they change a policy like this, it is to, you know, keep their profits or make profits. So obviously they've had a run-in or problems with having to pay out on uninsured motorist claims in Tennessee, because 1 in 4 drivers in Tennessee does not have any insurance.
So I think that was a relevant question to ask them, because there's your answer.
Yes.
If it's costing them money, that means it could be costing you money, so be careful.
They're passing the expense to us.
Right. And you know, uninsured motorist coverage is just relatively inexpensive.
It is.
It's not an expensive item if you're purchasing it yourself, or if Lyft or Uber was required to provide that. It's relatively inexpensive compared to other kind of insurance. But we need to think of in terms of protecting the consumer. And this is not what's happening. They're protecting big business by not requiring them to provide uninsured motorists.
In Georgia, there is a law where they have to have uninsured motorists up to $1 million. Now, let's be clear. You know, there is liability insurance. If an Uber driver causes an accident that causes a passenger injuries, Uber has insurance to pay for that. And Uber drivers do have accidents. You know, guess the #1 cause of Uber driver accidents?
It's what you would expect.
Distracted driving. You know why? Because they have that little GPS thing right there in front of them, you know, and so when an Uber driver is distracted, they're more likely to cause an accident. Also, fatigue. Why fatigue?
Because they're driving late at night.
Well, that, and usually Uber is a side hustle.
In a side hustle, they're working that as a second job or to supplement income, and there's not the regulations as they have on truck drivers.
Well, okay,
so let me just so an Uber driver causes an accident, runs a stop sign, injuries, you're covered. If that same accident occurred with an uninsured driver, you are the one paying your medical bills.
Yeah, but here's the silver lining to me in that equation.
You always see the silver lining, don't you?
You ought to have uninsured coverage.
Hey,
absolutely.
we've been saying that for years. Absolutely.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
There's no doubt that we as individuals should have uninsured motorist coverage. But the problem runs into if somebody doesn't have a car and they're utilizing an Uber for transportation.
That's it.
These people don't normally buy uninsured motorist coverage.
That is why, you know, Georgia has a law in the books, and Tennessee should have a law in the books. Tennessee has a law in the books that says Uber has to have $1 million policy if they're at fault. Right. They have nothing on the books regarding uninsured motorists.
Okay, so let's just say that you are somebody who lives on the North Shore and you don't need a car because you work from home and you don't have a car.
You ride your skateboard, you ride your bikes, you know, and if you got to go across town, you get an Uber or a Lyft.
Okay, it's just like the great question of can you go through the drive-through by walking or do you have to be in a car?
That's a good question.
Can you, I don't know the answer,
We'll try it next time,
can you have uninsured motorist coverage without a car?
Yes, you can buy insurance. You may have to.
That's
the
not
best thing to do is
real.
talk to your agent, but that's not a practical
That's not
thing.
real. I mean, Uber should have uninsured motorists.
What if you take a taxi cab?
Well, I hope they have uninsured. Well, that's a risk right there.
Some kind of the same thing.
Is it the same thing?
I don't know whether or not taxi cabs have to have uninsured motorists. If Uber doesn't, I don't think taxi cabs have to have uninsured motorists.
Is there a difference? This is
But
fun.
they do. I mean, because we have run into issues involving some cab services in town where uninsured motorists has been
They
in
do
play.
have uninsured
So the taxi cabs in Chattanooga that I've dealt with,
They have
uninsured motorists.
Because
yeah.
is there a difference too from a training perspective? You mentioned how it's a side hustle if you're an Uber or a Lyft driver. If you're a cab driver, is there like a vetting that you have to go through to be a cab driver compared to an Uber driver?
I
Listen, the last time I was in a cab was in New York City, and I went
Well,
like this.
Yes, exactly. That's the way I feel about
It's
that.
going to
too.
vary. I mean, for example, if you're in London, you have to study for decades to become a cab driver in London. New York City, I mean, these guys are experienced drivers. I mean, these are
just
really
depends on the
professions for these
location.
guys.
That's a good question, though.
Good question.
Okay.
We'll answer
So-
that next time, okay?
You can thank me later.
I will.
We're planning ahead. Okay, so does it matter how long a policy has been in effect before you have to make a claim?
No, I don't think that has any
So if you
bearing.
take the policy out today and you have a wrecked
Tomorrow,
tonight,
now, that's good. Now you can't have a wreck
There's no waiting
today.
period. Is that what you're
No.
suggesting?
Yeah.
There's no waiting period?
There's no waiting period at all. You know,
Okay.
you can get a policy. You need to check out your policy anyway, because uninsured motorists is, like John Mark said, dirt cheap for good coverage, just in case you get hit by an uninsured driver. Because the reason they're uninsured is because they're bad drivers. That's the problem. That's the cycle right there. They can't get insurance.
You should be purchasing uninsured motorist coverage, whether you're taking Lyft or taking Uber. You should have it on your own policy anyway.
Yeah, you
it's
should.
relatively inexpensive. You're protecting yourself, but Uber and Lyft should also be protecting
Yes.
the consumer.
Yeah.
I mean,
They're
that's the bottom
actually
line.
should-
And
What
we
if-
can contact our legislators about it.
Yes.
Sorry, but
yes.
okay, let me ask you this one. What if I'm in an Uber and I have uninsured motorists?
Right.
But my particular Uber driver also happens to have uninsured motorists. Suppose that my Uber driver's in a wreck with
Right.
another car. That car does not have insurance. Whose insurance do you try to use first, the driver's or mine?
Both. And really, that's why you need a lawyer in these ride-sharing cases, because it's like an onion. You're peeling away coverages and coverages and coverages. And sometimes in an Uber accident, you do have 3 or 4 policies in play, and you have to massage the policies to make sure that the client gets the best outcome.
The question becomes, does the policy follow the driver or follow
Right.
the vehicle? And it differs from Tennessee and Georgia.
Okay,
Right.
I thought about y'all yesterday.
What
I
happened?
think it was yesterday. I'm almost certain. I was on a road that you know how you always have like the same way you go to work and
Yes.
home every day, so you just kind of know it by memory. I was coming up doesn't matter. I was coming from Erlanger, and then getting onto Macaulay, right there by Park Ridge and all
I
that
know where
area.
you are, right.
And I don't do that very often. So I hung my left onto Macaulay, and there is this green lane. I guess it's a bicycle
It's a bike lane, right, yeah.
Do you run into problems with people when they're just not accustomed to where all those bicycle lanes are in
Absolutely.
town?
You really do. You really do.
I thought,
Now,
I just turned and I thought, whoa, I
Yeah.
mean, I could have.
luckily that there's no bicyclists in that
was
bike
my-
lane.
yeah.
That's a good thing right there.
But if there had been,
well, I mean, come
he would
on.
have had the right of way, but
Well,
they can come so fast.
I don't think you should be biking down Macaulay. Okay,
Well, clearly you
I'm
can.
just saying, green lane or not, you should not be on a bicycle going down Macaulay.
Well, bicyclists are supposed to follow the rules of the road.
Right.
You
And
gotta
I'm not
remember
saying
that.
they wouldn't have. It's
Yeah,
just that
so-
green lane jolted
Yeah,
me because
absolutely.
I'm not used to
I know
it.
exactly where you are there, and
So-
it's kind of sudden.
They're to follow the rules of the road just like an automobile. They're supposed to be traveling the
Do they
direction.
have to have uninsured motorists?
Well,
They're
it
not-
probably would cover
they're
them.
not they may
I'm
be-
not kidding. Do you
It
have
can,
to
it can
have?
boil down to whether you're covered as a pedestrian. It's not a motorized vehicle, so it's not going to fall in that category, but it could determine whether they're treated as pedestrian, not treated as pedestrian.
Wait, okay, I had 30 seconds.
But if
you're-
you hit that bicyclist, I don't care about uninsured motorists because you have insurance.
Yeah,
So,
but
I
if the
mean,
bicyclist hit me,
right.
are they required to carry some type of insurance to ride bikes on the road?
This is a law school exam here. I mean,
But-
this is like the bar exam 101 here. Do you know the answer to this, John Mark?
Goodness,
He's
you
the
know what?
brains of the operation.
You need to start submitting your questions at,
Yes,
least 40
exactly.
at least 48 hours
I'm
ahead of
the
time,
looks of
Julie.
the operation. He's the brains of the operation.
I'm
I'll turn to
sorry,
John
I'm
Mark
not
here,
trying to-
I'll be
y'all-
honest with you. This is a law school
You know what?
101 here.
Here's your
You know,
silver.
your umbrella policy may cover your negligence
Very
if you're
good.
operating
Very
a
good. Smart
bicycle,
guy.
but you know.
Exactly.
Okay, here's your
Anything else?
silver lining as I show you their contact information is that the point is each case is its own.
Yes,
So
give
they
us a
don't
call.
have to know all the answers sitting here on the green sofa. They're going to know the answers before your claim has to be dealt with,
you
and that's
preach,
what's
sister.
important.
You preach, sister. Go big R.
Amen.
Go Vols.
Ascension Living provides services